Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class video. And today's video is number 4 out of 10 in our Start Stamping video series. And here's a look at the cards that we'll be creating today. And the inspiration for today's cards is using a high impact card sketch with your floral stamps. And before we begin, I just wanted to mention, if this is your first time joining us, that my goal with these videos is to share my creative process as a professional designer to really help you start enjoying your hobby with less decision fatigue, start collecting products that you will use and love, and to use your stash. So here is a look at one of the 3 cards. We will be making all 3 in the video today. And here is the look at the sketch. So sometimes if I'm like, oh, I just really want to use some floral stamps, I'm in the mood to do some brushstroke stamping, I will start with a sketch, and that starts already lowering the number of decisions that I need to make. So this is the sketch we'll be using today. And then the next step that helps me get started is just selecting or gathering limited supplies. So I knew I wanted to use large floral stamps, and I wanted to have just a touch of background stamping to match up with that sketch. So I've got just a photo box here that I keep all of my supplies in as I gather them for each project. And these are the floral stamps that I'm using. These are gorgeous new brushstroke stamps from Penny Black's Cherished collection that recently came out. I store mine in envelopes just because I get prototype stamps and I don't have the original packaging, but if I do, I just keep them in the packaging, but that's why mine are in envelopes. So just to look at those. And then I've picked 3 different, as you can see, very well-loved stamps. So now I've just gone to my stash and picked out some background-ish stamps that I love, and I'm putting them into the box. So I'm gathering the new, but I'm combining it with the old. Usually with floral cards, I'm going to want some little butterflies, so I'm gathering our soaring die cut and our butterflies and leaves die cut sets because I just love those. Again, reaching into my stash to mix the old with the new and putting them in the box. So now I'm just going to do a die cutting session, and this has no decisions involved. And if I need any paper trimmed for the actual cards to match up with the sketch, I'll usually do this now too. So you can see I've just cut a bunch of those butterflies and I keep them in the envelope. So if I decide I want them, they're ready to go. And I will have all of these Penny Black products listed and linked for you down in the YouTube description box below. I've also trimmed my paper and I've put it in envelopes and labeled what type of paper it is because I want to stamp on the Bristol paper with the flowers. So I've just cut those down and put them into my box. And now I can just start stamping. I still don't have any idea like what sentiments I'm going to use, even where the sentiments are going to go, but I've pulled out my Bristol smooth cardstock and I'm ready to just enjoy the stamping process. So I'm using the brushstroke stamps with mini distress inks, and I'm inking them up here with a light yellow and then a darker golden yellow on top, putting the darker color mainly towards the bottom of the stamp. I'm lightly misting with water, and then I'm stamping onto that smooth Bristol paper. And I do have a paintbrush nearby and a cup of water where I can just bring a little bit of water over to that and just smooth out any blotchy areas from the misting, because I want this to have just a really like hand painted watercolor look. And that is so, look how easy that is to do. I just love these brushstroke stamps for that. But my biggest advice with these, if you've ever tried them or maybe had a little difficulty with them, is use the Bristol smooth paper and have a little paintbrush nearby with a little cup of water and a paper towel that you can go in and sort of smooth things off. Now I'm using the MISTI stamp positioning tool so that I can do multiple impressions. So you saw me there, I felt like they were a little bit light, so I went back and put a little bit more of that spiced marmalade color on there, respritzed and restamped, and just darkened it up a little bit. Or if you over spritz, you can go back in and restamp it again to recapture some of the detail. Now I'm moving on to the greenery. I've used Evergreen Bough and let's see here, Forest Moss. I put Evergreen Bough on all of the stems and leaves, and then the forest moss just onto a few of the areas, like at the base of the leaves primarily. Lightly misted and stamped, and again I have that paintbrush ready while it's still wet. I can go in and blend that, and if I need a little bit more water, I can put a little bit more water on my paintbrush. Now I like to use the mini distress ink pads because it's easier to get like just the green where I want the green and just the yellow where I want the yellow. But if you get some where you don't want it on the stamp, like if you get some green onto the tulip, I just wipe it off with my finger, or you could use a paper towel. Just be sure you do that before you stamp it down. Now I'm using this stamp again and just repositioning it a little bit so that I can cover more of the card. You wouldn't have to do this, but I was just loving doing these tulips so much that I just decided to stamp them some more. And I find it so fun to do this stamping when I already have the paper panels cut and I already have all of that done. Then I can just sit down and just really enjoy the stamping. Now I'm using these new brushstroke stamps, but you could use this sketch and this sort of design idea and of course the creative process with whatever stamps that you love. Any large florals would work really well with this card sketch. And you'll see more about that in the colors kind of coming up later in the video. So here I'm just kind of cleaning off the stamp, and I will move on to do the leaves and the stem. If you're new to brushstroke stamping, this is a really great stamp to start with because the flowers are pretty large and it's pretty easy to get your ink pad onto like the stems and the leaves without getting it onto the flowers, and the petal color without getting it onto the leaves, if that makes sense. But as you can see there, I either bring over a paper towel or my finger and just wipe it off if I get it where I don't want it to be. Very lightly misted that, and then I'm stamping that down, and I've got my paintbrush handy just to do some real quick light blending if I need to. So now I'm in my stamping session, I'm in the stamping zone, and I'm going to continue with this beautiful stamp. The stamp is called Lovely, and I'm just inking up the petals first. Now, like I said before, all of the supplies I'm using are listed for you down in the YouTube description box below, including the colors I've used on each flower stamp. So if you want to know specifically which colors I've used on this stamp or which ones I used on the tulips, I've sort of separated them out for you down in the description box below. And all of the Penny Black products are listed and linked for you down there. And I'm going to follow the same process with this one. I put that lighter purple or lavender color down over all of the petals, and then I tilted the Seedless Preserves purple color, and then using the corner of the ink pad, I dabbed that onto the stamp and then misted. I decided to add a little bit more and darken that up. So with the stamp positioning tool, you can add multiple layers if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. So it's just really up to you. For me, I just get fiddly and enjoy playing with it and stamping more and more. So sometimes I stamp it 2 or 3 times and I really could have stopped at just one. Here I'm just turning that ink pad on its side. Now you can also apply ink onto these stamps using water-soluble markers like Arteza Toy markers or Tombow dual brush pens, and follow the same process as well. I find it's just a little bit faster with the ink pads. And ink pads, you're patting that even surface onto the even surface of the stamp, so it just covers a little bit more evenly than the brushstroke motion you get when you color with a marker onto your stamp. But they both work with this technique, and if you have that brush handy after you stamp with a little bit of water to blend things a little bit, it all works out in the end, whether you're using a water-soluble ink pad like the Distress ink pads or a water-soluble marker like Tombow dual brush pens. And this project is really fun if you love brushstroke stamps, to just gather up all of your favorites, or if you've purchased some new ones, gather them up in that beginning step of gathering your supplies. Have all your paper cut down, and then you can just sit and really enjoy the stamping process with these brushstroke stamps. So now I've moved on to the new cling stamp Radiance. And again, I'm just following that same process. I'm working sort of color by color, and I am stamping and then have that brush handy to blend things out a little bit, even out any blotches from the misting. If I want to darken up the color a little bit, I can do that by restamping. And then blending it out. And what I love about these, the reason that they're called brushstroke stamps is because they look like you have just painted these flowers on here. They are like a no line look. They look like they've just been watercolored onto the paper, as opposed to like a black stamped outline of a flower that you've colored in. Both are beautiful, but there's just something really special about this brushstroke hand painted watercolored look, and it's so easy to get with these particular stamps. So I've moved on to the next color, realized I needed to be much darker, so I'm just re-inking that and stamping it again. And I'm just going to do that a few times. I always start light and then build up the color with more and more repetitions of stamping it instead of starting dark. I think I'm just a little bit wimpy about that. I love bright colors, but I like to work my way up to them, I guess. And I'll just blend those out again using that paintbrush. And darken them up a little bit too. And then go back and reblend. So it's a very forgiving process. Like I said, I often fiddle when I don't need to keep re-stamping or recoloring, but you also can do that. Now here's where I've pulled in a Tombow dual brush pen just to get those flower centers darkened. I wanted the precision of that tip, and it's just a little section that I'm coloring, and I really think that adds a lot to the finished image. Move on to these flowers in here. Again, using those mini ink pads, turning them on the side if I need to, so that I'm just getting the ink where I want it, and then watching with my fingertip. If I need to wipe any off that got away from me, I can. Combining a couple of different colors just for variation. The first one covering the entire petal, and then the second one not covering all of it. Misting and stamping. You can see the mix of those reds and the pink. I love how that looks. When I pick the colors, I just try to pick them from the same color family, so yellows and oranges, blues and purples, reds and pinks. And then I'm just going in and blending that. It's still a little bit wet from the misting and the stamping, but I have a little cup of water. I can wet my paintbrush. And this Bristol paper is what makes it super easy to blend this. Just going to play around here with a little bit more color. And blending. And then I'll grab that marker just to get the centers on there as well. I'm just deciding here how I want to do those leaves and the stems, but I want to clean this off a little bit. That way I just don't get more stamping, any residual ink left stamping on top of what I've already blended. And then I can work on these stems. I covered the areas that are large and open with the ink pad. Blend a little bit here with my paintbrush. And then right up here, it was just way too hard to try and get an ink pad in there. So I just used a green marker, Tombow dual brush pen to get those stems and these little areas right up close to the flowers. I don't know, I can't decide which one of these is my favorite of these 3 brushstroke stamps, but I'm kind of leaning towards this one where you can do lots of different flowers. So many different color combinations you could do this one as well. So now I've had my stamping session. Now I'm going to start assembling. So I'm going to finish these up using that sketch, putting together all those finishing touches. Now in this case it is going to involve a little bit of stamping because I want to add this background stamping that actually only shows just a little bit on the left of each card or on the bottom for the landscape card. So I've grabbed these background stamps. These were from my stash. This one is mosaic pattern. I love the mix of geometrics with florals. It's really fun. If you haven't tried that before, I highly recommend it. It just kind of makes both shine. And I'm stamping it with Versamark ink, and this one I am doing onto Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm going to sprinkle that with white embossing powder, and then I will heat to set that. Then using the same colors that I used onto the flowers, I'm going to pick that up with an ink blending tool and a foam pad and go over that edge of that background. And I love how that turns out. And this is where you can see this is such a nice formula for your floral stamps to get to a finished card without lots of decisions. You stamp your florals and color them in. Then using those same colors, you can do this embossing technique over on the side, and it just finishes it off so beautifully. I've also grabbed a Wink of Stella glitter pen, and I'm adding just a little touch of this onto the flowers. Now that is wet, and sometimes it will start to reblend what you've colored, so I'm being very gentle and just a little bit towards the base of those flowers with sort of a flicking, sweeping motion up towards the top, but that glitter is really pretty. I also stamped my sentiment on here in the only space that was left. So no decision involved in that. And I went ahead and stamped that in a shadow gray Archival ink, just very subtle. I decided I wanted to keep everything really soft with that brushstroke stamping. There you can see that glitter. I can't really capture it on the photos, but it's really pretty in real life. I added the butterfly and the card is complete. So here's a close-up and a look at that finished card following that sketch and following that creative process. Now I will continue to show you how I finished off these other 2. So I'm going to use an anti-static powder tool that helps the embossing powder only stick where I want it to stick, which is where I'm stamping it. This is the Penny Black Elaborate background stamp. Again, another one I pulled from my stash at the very beginning. So if you wanted to play along with this, grab your floral stamps, grab a couple of good background stamps, and you're ready to go. And I will sprinkle that with white embossing powder and heat to set. And then I will just grab those Distress ink colors that I used for the flowers on this one and add them right over the top. And wherever that's embossed, it's going to resist that ink because I'm using a water-soluble Distress ink. Using an ink blending tool and a foam pad. Just kind of matching up my colors there. I put down that first color and then just very lightly I'm applying this one on top just to darken it up a little bit. Use a paper towel to buff off any excess ink. And I follow the same process and I'm using that Wink of Stella pen again just to add a touch of glitter and a shine to those flowers. Super simple but super gorgeous cards in the end. I decided to go with all birthday sentiments on these so I can build up my birthday card stash. It's always nice to have those ready to go. And I'll try and give you a little look here at the shine that's on that, but it's really pretty. And I love with those Wink of Stella pens, it doesn't take away from the blending and the colors that you already did. It just kind of adds that shine right on top. And then a couple of butterflies on there to finish things off. And then finally, I'll go ahead and show you this last card. Now you saw that that stamp, that Radiance stamp with all the flowers on it, it was more of a landscape orientation. So I've just turned the sketch. So for this border portion, I am going to do that along the bottom. And then I'm using just a border stamp for that. This is from our Footnotes clear stamp set. I use this stamp all the time. As you can see, it's like totally black from being used so much, but it still works. I heat emboss that, and then I am just putting on some ink colors. And for this one, I decided to go with the greens because I couldn't decide which color I wanted to use from all the different flowers. So I went with the greens, which you could do for all of these cards actually. I'll buff off the excess there. And then I did add the flower panels using foam tape. So they're popped up a little bit from that background or border stamping. And I will add a little bit of glitter. I really hope with this START video series that you're enjoying seeing the creative process, that is inspiring you as much as the products and the projects may be inspiring you. I'd love to know. Please leave me a comment down in the YouTube comment section, because I just really like to know if you're enjoying seeing the entire process, or do you just prefer seeing just the card assembly and the techniques. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, hit that bell so you're alerted when the next start stamping video is published. And you can connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as Instagram and our website and blog, and they're all linked for you down in the YouTube description box below.